Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to today's GICTALK. My name is Kim, and I'm a volunteer here at GIC. Before we begin, I would like to ask you to please turn off your cell phones or switch them to silent mode. Today's GICTALK speaker is Haines, an English teacher at Susanangil English Academy in Gwangju, who earned his BA in Media Studies at Fordham University in New York. While he was growing up in Brooklyn, New York City, he was introduced to sports by his father, who was his basketball coach for years. His father taught him basketball but never cared about the game of baseball. However, after discovering an athlete named Mike Piazza, he became curious about baseball, especially the lesser-known New York team from Haines, the New York Mets. Now Jonathan is interested in sports, some call America's pastime. Today, Jonathan will speak to us about why baseball matters, especially in the context of American history. If you're like me and don't know much about the game of baseball and its significance in American history, then this talk will do much to explore and clarify that connection. There must be something to this game that has allowed it to become a worldwide sensation. Who knows, once we get to see baseball through Jonathan's eyes, maybe some of us will become new fans ourselves. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our speaker with a big round of applause.
That picture was actually from Halloween 3 years ago, but I never sent in a picture, so that's the picture that's in the used. Anyway, so today we'll talk about baseball. I was first asked to give a GIC talk many months ago, and I kept putting it off because I didn't know what to talk about. But I think that baseball is something that when I was home, I could talk about with my friends for many hours, so I guess it would be the most natural thing for me to talk about. However, I'm not in any way an expert on the subject. I'm not a Hall of Famer or anything like that, so just know that. Alright, so anyway, the title of my speech is Why Baseball Matters, because it's a little more interesting than just baseball. Let's go to baseball. Okay. Alright, so one night in Gwangju, when I was still thinking about the topic to talk about, I was watching, I was in a coffee shop, and on the TV was a Korean baseball game, and it was a playoff game, and there were many Korean people, and they were really excited, even though the Tigers weren't playing, the Kia Tigers. It was still an exciting time for them. And earlier that morning, I woke up and there was a Major League Baseball game where the Yankees from New York were playing the Orioles. And what had happened was the Yankees were losing, and it was the 9th inning. And Alex Rodriguez, who is an extremely well-paid athlete and very talented individual, he was slumping. He was doing a very terrible job during this time, during the game. And so the manager of the Yankees took out Alex Rodriguez, and he put in this guy, whose name is Raul Ibanez. And he's 40 years old, and he's not exactly an all-star in any regard. However, Raul Ibanez tied the game with a home run. And then a few innings later, he hit another home run, and the Yankees ended up winning. So, first of all, I'm not a Yankee fan. But I think after being in Korea for 9 months and always being referred to as the guy from New York, I've kind of become more of a Yankee fan than I used to be. And so I was very happy when he hit this home run. But the important thing is that I think why his hitting a home run was kind of cool was because the high-paid athlete was told to sit, and the 40-year-old man helped his team to win. So I thought that was kind of a cool thing. And I guess the point of one of the best things about baseball is that it could be anybody's turn to be the hero one day. And I think, like, because everybody always gets a chance, because if they're at bat, then they certainly have a chance to do something good. And usually it's the all-stars who do it more frequently, but there's always the chance that the 40-year-old guy will be the hero one day. So maybe one day when I'm 40, I'll be the hero. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so then no one knows how to play baseball. This is how. So you start at home plate. Yeah, you start here at home plate, and then you have to hit the ball and run to first base, and then the second, and then the third, and fourth. So I like the symmetry of baseball because every field is the same. This is always the same length. This is always the same length. That's always the same length. However, the outfield is always a little different, which I think is different from any other sport because a basketball court is always 94 feet, and a football field is always 100 yards, and it's the end zone. But baseball field is always a little bit different. So that's how I play baseball. And in Major League Baseball, there's 30 teams across 27 American cities, and then one from Canada, from Toronto. But I think Toronto's kind of like Little America in a way, because all the Torontonians that I've met in Korea just acted like Americans. So yeah. So these are all the teams. The oldest teams are the Braves and the Cubs, but the Braves started out somewhere other than Atlanta. And yeah, so where I'm from, there's actually two teams, the Yankees and the Mets. Yeah, so that's all of them. And this is another map. It has all the baseball caps from different teams. It's a little not updated, but that's okay. And pretty much if there's a big American city, there'll be a baseball team there. Kind of the same as in Korea. So most of the East Coast has a lot more teams than the West. So, except for California. I mean, baseball started out as an American sport, but in recent years it's become a lot more popular. Every 4 years there's this new thing called the World Baseball Classic. Baseball is no longer an Olympic sport, but now instead there's a tournament. So actually there's one in 2013 in March. But this is from 2009, this map. As you can see, America, which is the birthplace of modern baseball, it only made it to the semifinals. And Korea actually was a finalist, but they lost to Japan. So, a lot of Koreans that I talk to about the World Baseball Classic, they're really emotional about it because, you know, Korea and Japan, it's always a big deal. But in 2013 in March, there's another tournament, and it just shows that baseball has been increasing worldwide, and it's become more of a national sport. Not only on the adult level, but also through kids, because whereas the World Baseball Classic is played by a lot of professionals, there's also the Little League World Series, which is, 12-year-old kids playing. These games are usually a lot more fun to watch because the kids are always so into it. And when I was home, I would always watch the Little League World Series because it's very interesting. On the top left over here, this team is from Uganda, and they're something like, I think they're the first African team to make the tournament and actually win a game. And they were actually taught baseball by Christian missionaries in Uganda, which I thought was kind of cool. And then there's just a lot of other places. I think in Latin America, there's a lot of countries that like baseball, like Cuba and the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico. So there's a lot of major league players from those areas. There's also a growing number of Asian players too, from Korea and Japan and other places like that. I guess this is part one, but I've been talking for 10 minutes already, so it doesn't really make sense. That's okay. So baseball in America. How did baseball become the pastime of America? It's called, I guess if you ask someone now what America's sport is, they would probably say American football, because it is the most popular sport in the country. It's a good sport, but baseball will always be America's pastime. And what pastime means is that back in the 1800s and early 1900s, when there was no cell phones and internet, people would just sit around and talk about something. And since sports is a fun topic to talk about, baseball was usually what it was they would talk about. You could talk a lot about stats and statistics and whether or not a pitcher or a batter is good. So there's just a lot of different kinds of conversations that could go around. So this is a quote. Whoever wants to know the heart and mind of America had better learn baseball. The reason why I think that baseball is America's pastime is because it started in America when America was still a very young country. It came over from England, and I guess it grew up with America. You'll have to wait till later in the slideshow to see. Yeah, so baseball evolved from English games and Irish games. Cricket and rounders are sports that came before baseball. Eventually they evolved, and the modern game that we know today was invented in the United States, but the game on the top left is an English game that kids would play like on their front porch in England. So, and then the other ones, there's the cricket and rounders, and there's another one called base. I don't really know all of the rules of them, but pretty much they're all kind of, someone throws a ball and then the other person has to hit a ball, and then there's some kind of running involved, and yeah, so excellent. But the, his name's okay. But the time period where baseball became kind of America's sport happened during the Civil War. In the 1860s, America was split into North and South, and the North were these blue states over here, and the South were the gray states. And a lot of the soldiers from New York and the Northeast, actually, they heard of this game called baseball because it came over from England, and well, eventually it became baseball. And they would go to war, and they would be really bored in camp. So they would teach other soldiers from different states, like Pennsylvania and Ohio, Illinois, Indiana. They would teach them this game that they know called baseball. So eventually, baseball made its way west, and after the Civil War, it would make its way south. So even though the Civil War is the bloodiest battle in American history, I guess something good did come out of it, and it's baseball. There's a story about a bunch of northern troops who were relaxing, and they had nothing to do because it was a boring day. They were waiting for the next fight, and they started to play baseball. And then southern troops, the gray guys, they attacked the northern troops, and the center fielder was killed, and they lost their ball. Actually, I have the quote. 1 second. All right, so this is what it says. George Putman, a Union soldier, the Union is the North, fighting in Texas, wrote home saying, We were playing baseball near the front lines after a break in our skirmish. Suddenly, there was a scattering of fire, which 3 outfields caught the brunt. The center fielder was hit and captured. The left and right field managed to get back to our lines. The attack was repelled, but we had not only lost our center fielder, but the only ball we had in Alexander, Texas. So they were very upset because they lost their ball. After the Civil War, slavery was ended in America, but for the next 100 years, there was still a lot of disconnect in America, especially in the South, and there was a lot of racism. There still is racism in America, but especially in the South during those hundreds of years, there was still a little bit of racism. And it wouldn't be until the 1900s when baseball would allow someone who is not a white person to actually play in a major league game. So in the next slide, number 42 is Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson, he actually played for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and I'm from Brooklyn, so. He was the first person to play a Major League Baseball game and to be African American. And he had to deal with a lot of racism, but through courage and perseverance, he was able to set the standard for many people for years to come. Because today there's a huge portion of not only in baseball but in all sports, all American sports. There's African Americans and Asian Americans and not even just Americans, but just immigrants or just expatriates from different areas playing a sport in America. And I think that's what makes America a very happy place to be, because it's just a melting pot. And because of Jackie Robinson, that was possible. And not only was he the first person, but he's actually a very good baseball player also, too. In the 1990s, I think 1997 maybe, baseball actually retired the number 42. So every team in baseball, no new player could wear the number 42 because Jackie Robinson wore it, and he was so important to the sport in general that no one can wear 42. But every year on April 15th, which is the anniversary of, I guess, his first Major League game, every player on every team wears the number 42. So on the top, that's the Red Sox, and on the bottom, that's the Blue Jays. And everybody just wears 42 for one day. I guess it could be a little confusing if you don't know what's going on, but that's the reason. Next one. Baseball played an important part in, I guess, the Civil War history, and also Jackie Robinson breaking down the color barriers. Also, as a New Yorker, baseball was very important to me. After September 11th, I was in 8th grade, so I was very young. But for 10 days, there was absolutely no sports of any kind, because the country, or especially New York City, was still very stunned with what happened, and there were many people that lost people, and everyone was very upset and just depressed, and it was actually a very crappy time to be in New York. I was lucky enough that I didn't lose anybody too close to me, so I'm thankful for that. But 10 days later, on September 21st, was actually the first time that a major sport would be held. And it was the Mets and the Braves. And the Mets were losing by 1 run. And Mike Piazza, who's the catcher, he's actually wearing a NYPD helmet. All of the players were wearing NYPD or FDNY helmets, caps. NYPD is the police department, and the FDNY is the fire department. And they were all wearing them, both teams, just because it was a tough time for everybody. But anyway, so Mike Piazza gets up in the 8th inning and he hits a home run, and all of a sudden everybody in the crowd was just ecstatic. And it was honestly just the first time that I guess New York could really breathe easy since the attacks on the World Trade Center. So I guess baseball is just kind of a way of escaping reality and just breathing easier. It's not always the best time because, I mean, I'm a Mets fan and, you know, they don't really win too often. But there are always those times when it's a little easier to breathe thanks to, you know, sports or movies or whatever your escape is. And for me, or for many New Yorkers at the time, it was baseball, or the Mets even. Also, something that growing up in New York, I can't do the presentation without mentioning this part. Baseball is it's a very traditional sport. I guess it always starts in April when you know, the cold is done. I hate the winter, so I think the best time of the year for me is around April when it starts to get warmer and baseball comes back. And there's something always to look forward to. Every year, you could always expect to see the Yankees and the Red Sox, and they both hate each other. Especially in the Northeast, this is something that I grew up with, and it's something that's very funny. I actually can't stand New Yorkers who like the Red Sox because they just don't like the Yankees. I think it's the stupidest thing in the world. But it's just, yeah, so, yeah. Okay, next one. The next one's a little more interesting. I guess the Yankees and the Red Sox, what makes the rivalry even greater is that there's always those players that played for both teams, and they'll be liked one year, and then the next year they'll just be completely despised because they went to the opposing team. There was actually a Red Sox player who just signed with the Yankees a couple, or maybe last week, so I'm wondering how that would go for him. But on the left, that's Babe Ruth. The Red Sox sold him to the Yankees, and they say there's kind of like a curse. There was a curse after they sold him, and the Red Sox ended up not winning any championships for a long time after that. So, and the Yankees, pretty much in the early 1900s, the Red Sox were the team to beat, and they won a lot of championships. But after they sold Babe Ruth, they ended up not winning another championship, while the Yankees won 27 during the 1900s and 2000s. But the Red Sox did win twice this past decade, so good for them. And then Roger Clemens and Johnny Damon are two other people who played for both teams. Johnny Damon is actually one of the only players who won a World Series with both the Red Sox and the Yankees, since the Red Sox haven't won a World Series in a while. So when he went to the Yankees, he was forced to shave his beard and his hair, so now then he looked like that. What's next? Yeah, so this is another quote. Nothing in our daily life offers more of the comfort of continuity, the generational connection of belonging to a vast and complicated American family, the powerful sense of home, the freedom from time's constraints, and the great gift of accumulated memory than does the national pastime. So, like I was saying, like the pictures of the two Red Sox, the Red Sox and the Yankee from 60 years ago, and the Red Sox and the Yankee from now. There's just, you know what to expect, and you know that in 20 years you could still expect to see the Yankees and the Red Sox play, or could always expect to see the same things. If you're from California, you could always expect to see the Dodgers or the Giants or something like that. So there's always that sense of being able to come back to something that you already know. It's sort of like returning home in a way. Yes. So. Yeah. Okay. I need my notes for this one because I had something here. All right. So. So a lot of people would say that baseball is like a metaphor of life, and it's honestly really cliche to say, and I don't really understand it, but I'll do the best that I can to explain it. This is Derek Jeter. He's probably the most famous baseball player in America, and he's been on the Yankees for his entire career, but he's like 38 years old now, so he's coming to the twilight of his career. But I like this picture because it looks like he's almost depressed or struggling, and for Derek Jeter, he has nothing to be depressed about because, I mean, he's the most popular face in America, and he makes a lot of money, and he has plenty of championships. So his career is set. Like, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. But every time he goes up for an at-bat, he has to focus and forget everything that he's done in the past, and he has to focus on the present. And what's interesting about baseball is that if a batter can only hit 30% of his attempted at-bats, he's considered successful. Baseball's a sport where a hero would be someone that fails 70% of the time, or someone like Raul Ibanez who succeeds when the time comes, or if Derek Jeter is put in a difficult situation and he's forced to get a hit in the 9th inning and he doesn't get a hit, he's not considered good. He's considered the reason why the Yankees lost. But he's a very good, he's been a good hitter in the clutch, I think. So next one. This is another Yankee. Actually, I use a lot of Yankees. I don't know why. This is Curtis Granderson, and you can't really see it, but on the brim of his hat, he has words written, and it says, "Don't think, have fun." And I don't know. I think that's kind of a cool little quote, because you could kind of dive into a lot of the statistics of baseball, and it could get very mathematical. But honestly, if you overthink, if you just try too hard, I think you're just setting yourself up for failure. And I think that the reason why he has this on his hat is because if you think too hard, you'll fail. And if you just relax and do the best you can and have fun with the game that you're playing, then you're able to succeed more often. And I guess that goes for a lot of parts of life. Like, for example, if I'm if I'm giving a GIC talk and I'm overthinking it right before, I'm probably gonna fail. But if I just relax and talk to you guys, then maybe I'll do a little bit better. However, I'm not very much of a public speaker, so next one. So that's me on the left. This is in Central Park. I just wanted a picture of me playing baseball so you know that I'm not full of baloney. So this is another quote. Is there anything that can evoke spring and the first fine days of April better than the sound of a ball smacking into the pocket of a big mitt, the sound of a bat as it hits the horse hide? Yeah, these are my friends who are all playing baseball. That's Rob over there, and that's Miguel. And I don't know those guys in the back. Maybe I don't. So yeah, I in terms of why baseball is important to me, it's because let me read from here because I have something prepared. All right. Baseball's main objective is to return home, to home plate. And for the past 9 months, I've been living in Gwangju and have been enjoying myself teaching at a hagwon. However, since I'm not from Gwangju, I know that one day I'll have to go back home and return home. And I think that baseball is kind of a good metaphor for that because I'm kind of, on second base right now, and maybe one day I'll return home and when it becomes spring again or something like that. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Okay, next one. Yeah, so coming home. So this is another quote by another former Yankee. He's talking about Yankee Stadium, the original Yankee Stadium, which is the picture over here. Yankee Stadium was built in the early 1900s, and it remains in the Bronx, New York, until I think 3 years ago. And they made a new Yankee Stadium. However, there were many championships won in the old Yankee Stadium, so it's always like, you know, it's kind of like a museum or something. So the quote says, "It's a place where men become children, and children never forget as men." So what that means is that, like, I mean, what that means for me at least is that when you're growing up and you like something, you know, when you grow older, the most important thing is to when you think of that thing. Like, for example, like baseball, I'll remind myself of when I was 7 years old watching it or something like that. So it's kind of coming home in a sense, in a metaphorical sense even, that you're reminded of, you know, your friends from a long time ago, or your family from a long time ago, and it's something that's could be kind of cool to think back at memories and come home. So, and I always teach my students to finish their speeches by saying, "Thank you for listening to my speech." So that's how I wanted to finish my speech. This is Ken Griffey Jr., and he's probably one of my favorite baseball players and one of the best players ever. And unfortunately for Ken Griffey Jr., he was always on a bad team. So even though he was probably one of the most talented players in the world, he never really did much because he was always on the Mariners, and they were never very good, or the Reds, but they were never very good either. And that's it. So thank you for listening to my speech.
All right, now we're going to begin the question and answer portion of the talk. When you came in, if you didn't receive a piece of paper and you'd like to ask a question, please raise your hand and one of our volunteers will give you a piece of paper. And if you write your question down, they'll bring it up to me and I'll read it. So before we begin, please do not raise your hand to ask a question. We prefer that you write it down and I can ask it that way. Okay, so to begin the Q&A, I'll ask a few not too personal questions, but somewhat personal. I think you mentioned you came to Korea 9 months ago, is that right? Why Korea and why Gwangju?
You get this question from every Korean. I had no specific reason to come to Gwangju. I went through a recruiting agency and they found Gwangju for me. In terms of why I came to Korea, well, I wanted to come to some place that I don't know much about, and I've never been to Asia before coming here, so that's why I made my way over here. And I really like Gwangju. It's a good fit, so I'm glad I did come.
I assume you're on a year-long contract. What will you do next year? Will you stay, or?
I'm still debating. I'm at the 9-month mark, so it's possible that I'll return to Korea. It's possible that I'll return to Gwangju. I'm not sure. I've heard it's 2 years is such a long time to commit to. So I do want to go home for a little bit at least, so, and then decide from there.
Okay. Do you often watch Korean baseball games on TV, or do you go to games here?
I've been to a few. I've been to Mudong Stadium, but I also went to Busan and saw the Tigers against the Giants, which was an interesting experience because I've never been rooting for the road team. I've never done that before. The Tigers actually lost, but it was okay though. But yeah, I also like to watch it on TV more often.
How does the experience here compare to the experience back home, like sitting in the stands and things like that?
I think that fans here in Korea are more they're more closely related to soccer fans, I'd say. And I think soccer fans are all about, you know, chanting and making different, like each player has their own little gimmick, or like each player has their own little song. In America, I think it's more of just like a bunch of drunk guys telling people to sit down. And I still like to go to games. I think more often I like to watch on TV though.
Okay. You mentioned Mike Piazza. Why are you so interested in Mike Piazza? What about him is so great?
Well, he was probably the first player that I actually liked. I think when I was younger, he was the best player on the Mets at the time, and I was young and malleable, so he was kind of like my go-to guy, and I always figured that when he came up, he'd be the one to make a hit or something like that.
Okay. Who are some of your other favorite players in addition to Mike Piazza?
Well, like you saw Ken Griffey Jr. He's another good one, and Derek Jeter. I do like Derek Jeter. I'm a big fan of Jose Reyes, who used to be on the Mets, and David Wright, who's on the Mets now, and R.A. Dickey, who's on the Mets now, not for much longer probably. He won the Cy Young, actually. Usually a lot of Mets I like. I also like, I've been liking Chu Shin-Soo recently because I was so excited when I got here because they show American baseball on TV, but after a while it kind of got annoying because they always showed the Indians, and they're not very good. But I don't know, I guess I kind of like Chu now because, you know, he's someone to root for, and everybody's always so excited when he comes up. So, yeah.
Okay. You mentioned the rivalry between the Yankees and the Red Sox. What are some other major rivalries?
A few years ago, when the Mets were still good, there was a big rivalry with the Phillies from Philadelphia. The Phillies actually won the World Series, though, and the Mets never did in recent times. And then there's also rivalries. There's 2 points of the year where they have interleague play, which is when there's 2 leagues in America. There's the National League where the Mets play, and the American League where the Yankees play. And 2 times during the year, you have teams from each league play each other. So the Yankees would play the Mets. So for 6 days out of the year, I'm 100% Mets, and I hate the Yankees. But other than that, I do like the Yankees. And then also there's I know that the Giants, San Francisco plays Oakland, that's another one, and LA plays Anaheim, that's another one. And Texas, there's teams from Texas that are rivals. Usually, if teams are from a similar area but they play in a different league, they're rivals.
Okay. You mentioned that most major American cities have teams. What are some of the biggest cities without teams?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. I'm not sure. I would need a map.
So much. What's your opinion of the steroids era of baseball?
Wow, I'm like on the oath right here. I don't know. I think it's kind of a shame because I don't know. Honestly, I hate when I'm teaching class and I let kids play cards or something, and then they'll cheat. Like it's just kind of ruins it for everybody else. So I don't know. I guess it's always surprising to watch a player and to think, wow, this guy's so good, and then you realize that a few months later that he was actually doing it with steroids, and it kind of just takes away the magic of maybe that guy was a great athlete, but actually he was just using kind of game genie and cheating. So I'm not really a big fan, I guess.
In that case, should Mark McGwire be in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I think that it's tough to say because, like, Barry Bonds was such a great player before he started using steroids. So, I mean, if you look at his stats before, he would say, wow, this guy's great. Like, he's definitely going to the Hall of Fame. And I mean, Mark McGwire had pretty awesome seasons as well. And I mean, there's this rule in the Baseball Hall of Fame that if you take steroids, like, you just can't get in. So I would have to say, I guess you can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You mentioned older players. Do many baseball players tend to be older than, or have longer careers than players in basketball or American football?
I think football players are, they probably have the shortest careers because there's so much physicality in the sport. Whereas in baseball, unless you're a pitcher, you're probably just standing around in the outfield doing nothing. And baseball players play every day because there's not really much to do for a lot of the game, which I like. It's very relaxing. So yeah, there's a lot of players that are into their 30s and almost 40s even. So yeah.
Okay. Where in the world exactly is baseball increasing a lot in popularity and also decreasing?
It's increasing in Latin America. Like I said before, I think the largest number of players that aren't American come from like the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Cuba, those kinds of countries. It's also increasing in Asia. The Dodgers just signed a guy from Korea. So I think it's kind of like a domino effect. Once one person comes, then it just starts the wave. It's like the Jackie Robinson wave. So I think once Park Chan-ho came to the major league, I think kind of set the standard for Koreans into America, and now the major leagues is where they want to go.
Okay. Statistics related to baseball are pretty popular. Has the statistical analysis of baseball spilled over into other areas not related to baseball? Do you know that?
Not really. I'm not really sure about that, but I guess I do fantasy baseball with my friends back home, and it's actually really hard to do when the games are when you're sleeping, but that's another story. But it's always fun to look at the statistics, and I think if you have that kind of mind, if you're a very mathematical person, it's kind of fun. Maybe if you're like into stocks or something like that, it's probably something that you'd like. Yes.
Okay. Do you have a favorite baseball movie?
The Sandlot's really good. The National's good. I would say it's Sandlot. I think it's the best one.
Okay. And do you remember your first major league game?
Yeah, actually.
What was that like?
It was really rainy. Well, it had just rained, and the seats were all wet. It was at Shea Stadium in Queens, and the Mets were playing the Rockies from Colorado. And that's probably why I'm a Mets fan, because I didn't go to a Yankees game until I was in high school. But the Mets won, but I just remember sitting on newspapers because the seats were all wet. I went with my friend from school.
Is baseball decreasing in popularity in the United States, and if so, why?
I don't think it's decreasing, but I think that there's just so many other in the 1800s and 1900s, when it was called America's pastime, there was only so many things people could do. But now it's like, you know, you have ESPN, ESPN2. There's so many different sports you could watch. So everything's kind of splintered, and so I don't think it's decreasing. I just think that maybe the attention span of your average American is just all over the place. So it's hard for everyone. It's hard for someone to be following the World Series because that's about the time when, you know, football is going and baseball and basketball is starting up. So, yeah.
Okay. What do you think about the claim that sports make people not think about bigger social issues or political issues?
I think it's kind of true, actually. I think sports could be like an escape, like I said, and I mean, it could be a good thing, but in the same way, I mean, like if someone follows sports too much, they probably don't know what's going on in the world, which could be a bad thing. So it's definitely a true thing.
Okay. And this will be our last question for the Q&A. You mentioned that your father was not interested too much in baseball. Have you converted him with your enthusiasm?
No one in my family likes baseball, actually. I know.
All right, that's the end of the Q&A. If you didn't get an opportunity to ask him your question, you can ask immediately following the talk. Thanks a lot, and let's give him another round of applause.